Hello everyone! Welcome back to my channel. My name is Mary Chris, and for today's video, we are going to read chapter 6 of Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. We're on chapter 6 called Intimately Oppressed. I didn't get a chance to write up my comments and whatnot on my laptop, so we're gonna approach this in a different way. I don't really know how I'm gonna edit this, so either way, it's gonna be good. It helps me read and discuss the topics that matters to me, and hopefully to you as well. Okay, let's get started. The Intimately Oppressed. It is possible, reading standard history, to forget half of the population of the country. The explorers were men. The landholders and merchants, men. The political leaders, men. The military figures, men. The very invisibility of women, the overlooking of women, is a sign of their submerged status. In this invisibility, they were something like black slaves, and thus slave women faced a double oppression. The biological uniqueness of women, like skin color and facial characteristics for Negroes, became a basis for treating them as inferiors. True, with women, there was something more practically important in their biology than skin color: their position as childbearers. But this was not enough to account for the general push backward for all of them in the society, even those who did not bear children, or those too young or too old for that. It seems that their physical characteristics became a convenience for men. For those who could use, exploit, and cherish someone who was at the same time servant, sex mate, companion, and bearer, teacher, warden of his children. Societies based on private property and competition, in which monogamous families became practical units for work and socialization, found it especially useful to establish this special status of woman, something akin to a house slave, in the matter of intimacy and oppression, and yet requiring, because of that intimacy and long-term connection with children, a special patronization which on occasion, especially in the face of a show strength, could slip over into treatment as an equal. An oppression so private would turn out hard to uproot. Earlier societies in America and elsewhere, in which property was held in common and families were extensive and complicated, with aunts and uncles and grandmothers and grandfathers all living together, seemed to treat women more as equals than did the white societies that later overran them, bringing civilization and private property. The civilization word is in quotation. In the Zuni tribes of Southwest, for instance, extended families, large clans, were based on the woman whose husband came to live with her family. It was assumed that women owned the houses, and the fields belonged to the clans, and the woman had equal rights to what was produced. A woman was more secure because she was with her own family, and she could divorce the man when she wanted to, keeping their property. Women in the Plains Indian tribes of the Midwest did not have farming duties, but had a very important place in the tribe as healers, herbalists, and sometimes holy people who gave advice. When bands lost their male leaders, women would become chieftains. Women learned to shoot small bows, and they carried knives because among the Sioux, a woman was supposed to be able to defend herself against attack. The puberty ceremony of the Sioux was such as to give pride to a young Sioux maiden. "Walk the good road, my daughter, and buffalo Herds wide and dark as cloud, shadows moving over the prairie will follow you. Be dutiful, respectful, gentle, and modest, my daughter, and proud walking if the pride and the virtue of woman are lost. The spring will come, but the buffalo trails will turn to grass. Be strong with the warm, strong heart of the earth. No people goes down until their women are weak and dishonored. See that last line? Because it's kind of like he got it. He'll tell us where he got that quote, but that's really interesting. It says, no people goes down until their women are weak and dishonored. It's true. In order for a society to be strong, you need your women to be part of the society and be equal to them. So basically, in the first part, he's just saying how in countries at the time, in the earlier societies in America, where, you know, property was the main thing, private property, is women were basically also treated like property, and they were to, you know, stay home. And in the indigenous peoples of Americas, like in the Sunni tribe, they own they can keep their property and they can divorce. And in the plains Indian tribes of the US, they didn't have farming duties, but they were healers, herbalists, and sometimes like holy people, and they give advice. And when the male leader died, they can become chieftains. And so that's a very interesting, because when we see history presented to us, it's always that, oh, you were colonized because you know less, or you need to be civilized. And yet, the more I read in this book, the more you're like, no, we were really civilized already before. They were already civilized, and they already knew what they were doing. They didn't really need to be civilized. And that's like kind of like the running theme of this book so far. We're only on chapter 6, is that it definitely kind of breaks that, oh, we have to civilize people trope, because they're still doing that today, where you see words like, oh, those immigrants, they're taking our jobs and they're inferior, and they don't say the word inferior, but oh, they're criminals coming here. And we have to be very careful, and of course we need to give them a benefit of the doubt, and know that these tactics have already been used before, right? So that is very interesting, how it's such a cliche, but it's true. History repeats itself. And of course, I'm not saying we haven't changed. Of course, our society's improved, but there's still that running theme. Like if you look at the South, not the South, what was I gonna say? Like in the United States, where they're not outright making abortion illegal, like the right for the woman to decide for herself, because they know there's gonna be like, first of all, it's illegal because they've passed in the Supreme Court before, but they're doing it like making it harder. Like, oh, you need to have so much legislation, for example, that is not needed, just to make it harder. I will try to link the Democracy Now! Videos down below, but basically my point is, restriction to women's rights is an attack on women's rights, and an attack on women, on what on our independence, right? And as that line says, no people goes down until the women are weak and dishonored. And if you're gonna dishonor women by being condescending to them, and no, we're gonna decide if you're gonna, if you're ready to get pregnant and have a family, that's gonna be a downfall of your society. It would be an exaggeration to say that women were treated equally with men, but they were treated with respect. And the communal nature of the society gave them a more important place because it's a more communal type of living, as opposed to they share their properties, for example. When they have crops, it's divided for everyone. That's more communal, as opposed to at the same time in Europe, where it's more feudal, where it's only a certain amount of people have property. The condition under which white settlers came to America created various situations for women. Where the first settlements consisted almost entirely of men, women were imported as sex slaves, child bearers, and companions. In 1619, the year that the first black slaves came to Virginia, 90 women arrived at Jamestown on one ship. Agreeable persons, young and incorrupt, sold with their own consent to settlers as wives, the price to be the cost of their own transportation. Many women came in those early years as indentured servants, often teenaged girls, and lived lives not much different from slaves, except that term of service had an end. They were to be obedient to masters and mistresses. The authors of America's Working Women describe the situation. They were poorly paid and often treated rudely and harshly. Deprived of good food and privacy, of course, these terrible conditions provoked resistance, living in separate families without much contact with others in their position. Indentured servants had one primary path of resistance open to them. Passive resistance, trying to do as little work as possible and to create difficulties for their master and mistresses. Of course, that masters and mistresses did not interpret it in that way, but saw the difficult behavior of their servants as sullenness, laziness, malevolence, and stupidity. Okay, so I'm gonna stop right there. Once again, you know how in our society, poor people are depicted as these, like malevolence, lazy, stupid, and we know that this go way back, not just now. So I definitely trying to be on that path of unlearning, because we all have something to unlearn, all these prejudices and biases, right? For instance, the General Court of Connecticut in 1645 ordered that a certain Susan C., for her rebellious carriage toward her mistress, to be sent to the house of correction and be kept to hard labor and coarse diet, to be brought from next lecture day to be publicly corrected, and so to be corrected weekly until order be given to the contrary. Sexual abuse of masters against servant girls became commonplace. The court records of Virginia and other colonies show masters brought into court for this. So we can assume that these were especially flagrant cases. There must have been more instances never brought to the public light. In 1756, Elizabeth Spriggs wrote to her father about her servitude. What we fortunate English people suffer here is beyond the probability of you in England to conceive. Let it suffice that I am one of the unhappy. Number am toiling almost day and night, and very often in the hoarsest drudgery, with only this comfort that you, bitch, you do not have enough, and then tied up and whipped to the degree that you'd not serve an animal, scarce anything but Indian corn and salt to eat, and that even begrudged. Nay, many Negroes are better used. Almost naked, no shoes nor stockings to wear. What rest can we get is to wrap ourselves in a blanket and lie upon the ground. Whatever horrors can be imagined in a transport of black slaves to America must be multiplied for black women, who were often 1/3 of the cargo, slave traders reported. So this was one of the reports. I saw a pregnant woman give birth to babies while chained to corpses, which horrors can be imagined in a transport of black slaves to America must be multiplied for black women, who were often 1/3 of the cargo, slave traders reported. I saw pregnant women give birth to babies while chained to corpses which our drunken overseers had not removed. Packed spoon fashion, they often gave birth to children in the scalding perspiration from human cargo. On board the ship was a young Negro, chained to the deck, who had lost her senses soon after she was purchased and taken on board. A woman named Linda Brent, who escaped from slavery, told of another burden. But I now entered on my 15th year, a sad epoch in the life of a slave girl. My master began to whisper foul words in my ear. Young as I was, I could not remain ignorant of their import. My master met me at every turn, reminding me that I belonged to him, and swearing by heaven and earth that he would compel me to submit to him. If I went out for a breath of fresh air after a day of unwearied toil, his footsteps dogged me. If I knelt by my mother's grave, his dark shadow fell on me there. The light heart which nature had given me became heavy with sad forebodings. So I'm gonna end it there. We will continue chapter 6, and it's just so sad, so extremely sad. But yeah, if you like A People's History of the United States, if you like history, you like booktubes, please press that like button, subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.